maybe quite possibly the most famous person, or at least one of the more famous people in your book that you talk to, are the parents of Darren Klebold. This is one of the two shooters in the Columbine massacre. Talk to me about why you talked to them and what was the significance of that, and what surprise you got from them.
So it used to be that we thought that homosexuality was caused by overbearing mothers and passive fathers. And we used to think that autism was caused by refrigerator mothers, and that schizophrenia was caused by parents who nurtured a wish that their child not exist. And if we go back 200 years, we get to the point at which people thought dwarfism was caused by the unexpressed lascivious longings of the mother. And so as we've looked at all of those categories, we've stopped blaming parents. But in crime, we continue to say, I brought my children up properly and they didn't do anything like that.
Yes.
And when I researched the chapter, I thought, okay, criminality feels often more like an illness than any of the illnesses we're looking at. And I wanted to examine that idea that actually you can be a really good parent and have a child who commits a crime. And the Klebolds, it was an extraordinary experience because I went out to meet them thinking, okay, I've persuaded these people to talk to me, and when I get to know them, I'll see what they did that caused this. And the more I got to know them, the more I liked them, the more I felt that while I'm basically very fond of my own parents, I would have been happy to be brought up by these people. Wow. The more I thought there really is no more explanation for how they caused the crime than there is for how some other mother caused her child's autism.
Boy, and their basic take on their own son is what? You know, you talk about the stranger in our midst. When you have a baby, there's nothing, it's not reproduction, it's you're producing a stranger in your midst. How did they respond to this idea? They had a stranger in their midst, not at birth, but at high school age.
Yes, and I think that they almost can't forgive themselves for having that experience. I mean, Dylan's mother said to me at the end of our first weekend of interviews, when we had spent something like 20 hours recording interviews, we were all exhausted. We were sitting around the kitchen table having dinner, and she said to me, I said to Dylan, to Sue and Tom, I said, if Dylan were here now, do you have a sense of what you'd want to ask him or what you'd want to tell him? And his father said, I sure do. I'd want to ask him what the hell he thought he was doing. And his mother kind of looked at the floor, and she thought for a second, and then she looked back up and said, I would ask him to forgive me for being his mother and never knowing what was going on inside his head.
Wow. Yeah. That's the fear I would think of every parent with their child, right?
Absolutely. And I look at it really differently now. I look at my own children, who seem to me altogether charming and delightful, and who are still far too small to have done anything very destructive. But I think you don't know. You think you know your children, you think you know other people. Maybe you do, but there's always the possibility that they've got a secret life that you can't see.
Yeah. Again, there's so much I want to cover, but you choose, and you didn't have to do this, you interjected your own personal situation at the beginning. The book is bookmarked by a chapter about you called Son, where you are the son and talk about being the son of your parents. And the last chapter is about you being the father. As this book, it almost feels too Hollywood, kind of this script where you're doing this research about parents and children, and then in that 10-year gap, of course it's a long time, I guess it's not that long, you actually do become a parent yourself. Why did you choose to do that, and what do you have to say about being a son and being a parent that you wouldn't have said before you wrote this book?
So many people have expressed surprise that I decided to become a parent while I was working on this book, and people said to me, you're doing this book about everything that can go wrong. How can you bear to be contemplating parenthood? And I said, it's actually a book about how even when everything goes wrong, parents love their children and are glad that they're parents. And it's a book about that kind of resilience. And if all of these people could love all of these children, then I'm going to be able to love whatever children I produce. And it was a reassurance I needed before I could go ahead and become a dad.
Very good. And yet, I must say there was some kind of... smug is not the right word, but I loved in your last chapter, you are so accepting and you've learned the lessons of acceptance about all of these things that might not be ideal, and yet when the moment came for your own child, I don't know if you'd call it a moment of terror, but it certainly was a like, oh no! Can you talk about that? Did you feel like this was sort of the comeuppance you had coming?
So the day after my son was born, the pediatrician said that he was not extending his legs properly, and she suggested he might have brain damage, and we needed to get an MRI done, and he might have asymmetrical brain development or a tumor. I mean, she listed a sort of horrifying list of things. And I did have that exact feeling. I thought, okay, all these people have found meaning in disability, and I would like my child not to join their ranks.
Yeah.
I have to say, though, that I felt like if he had joined their ranks, unfortunately he turned out to be fine, that I would have been prepared to respond to it very differently than I would have responded to it if it had happened 10 years earlier. But, you know, my point is, you can find meaning in difficulty. You still don't want difficulty if you can avoid it. And you certainly don't want difficulty or pain for your children. But if it's there, you can try to find meaning in it rather than simply railing against it.
Yes, and actually, I think you argue, and maybe not vociferously, but you argue that come with difficulty and pain comes a richness, a deepness to your emotional life that you might not have had otherwise.
Yes. I mean, I don't think that you have to seek out the difficulty and pain. There's plenty of it to show up in all of our lives. There's no shortage of difficulty and pain. But I think one of the families I interviewed actually said, incredibly beautifully, I thought, the mother of a very severely disabled, two very severely disabled children. And she said, it's not that there's inherently meaning in these experiences, it's that we have chosen to construct meaning in them. And I thought in the end, it doesn't matter whether these people who say, I'm so glad I've had the life I had because I love my child so much, it's just who he is. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It matters whether they can talk themselves into it. Because if you can believe it, you can be a good parent to your child and have a fulfilling life. And if you don't believe it and are constantly complaining about how bad fate has been to you, it takes over your life and it gets in the way of everything else.
Brilliant. I would like, as the last thing here, as we have to wrap up, I would like you to read a single paragraph from your book. Do you have a paragraph picked out that you would most like to read that you think is the essence of your book? If not, you know, I could suggest something, but...
Since it's the end of the show, I might read the closing paragraph.
Beautiful. Okay, here's the book. I trust
Thank
you know
you.
it well.
Yes, I've seen it before. And here we are. It's book 4. Given how unimaginable my family would have been 50 years ago, I have no choice but to champion progress. Change has been good to me, and I am indebted to it. I hope these stories will contribute to the cataract that is honing the rough surface of the world. Until the planet grows smooth, however, love will continue to toughen under siege. The very threats to love strengthen it even as they suffuse it with pain. In the harsh moments of loss that are my topic here, love manacles a tender heart. I felt something brilliant and terrifying for my son as he lay in that Star Trek-like CAT scanner that I had not yet felt for little Blaine, who had not encountered such adversity, or for Oliver and Lucy, who were already themselves when I got to know them. It changed my relationship to them all. Children ensnared me the moment I connected fatherhood with loss. But I'm not sure I would have noticed that if I hadn't been immersed in this research. Encountering so much strange love, I fell into its bewitching patterns and saw how splendor can illuminate even the most abject vulnerabilities. I had witnessed and learned the terrifying joy of unbearable responsibility, recognized how it conquers everything else. Sometimes I had thought the heroic parents in this book were fools, enslaving themselves to a life's journey with their alien children, trying to breed identity out of misery. I was startled to learn that my research had built me a plank, and that I was ready to join them on their ship.
Beautiful.
Thank you.